This Whirlwind Quake Summoning Barb is absolutely insane. It's fast, it's mobile, it's tanky, and it will actually push very high into the pits. It will farm tier 4 bosses, and it will do everything that you're going to need it to do in the endgame process. This is going to be my first iteration of this build. We'll be doing updates as the build evolves. Keep up with the planner. The planner will be in the description of this video. I will keep an updated change log in the planner for you, so you can see how things change as it shifts. We're going to be working on some cool little variants for this build, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and keep on following, because this build is only just scratching the surface with how far it can go. We're going to show you a quick run of what it looks like so you can see exactly how fast and how hard this thing goes, and then we'll hop into the skill tree and I'll show you exactly how to set this up.
From the ash, with fury in my heart, I'm ready to clash. A whirlwind of chaos, a tempest of might. I charge through the fields, ready to fight. In Cliptis legion, we stand as one, with steel in our hands, and the battle's begun. Through the fire and fury, through the dark and night, we'll battle the bosses, we'll bring forth the light. Across the countryside, I roam like a storm. With every step taken, my spirit is born. Mobs of hell's creatures, they rise from the ground, but I'm wielding my axe, and I won't back down. In Cliptis legion, we stand as one, with steel in our hands, and the battle's begun. Through the fire and fury, through the dark and night, we'll battle the bosses, we'll bring forth the light. In the dungeons deep, where shadows creep, with echoes of warriors' promises to keep. Facing Lilith, I feel the thrill. With one mighty strike, I bend her will. In Cliptis legion, we stand as one, with steel in our hands, and the battle's begun. Through the fire and fury, through the dark and night, we'll battle the bosses, we'll bring forth the light. Cliptis legion, hear the battle cry. Together we fight, together we fly. In Cliptis legion, we're never undone. With our hearts ablaze, we're the fearless ones. In Cliptis legion, we stand as one. In Cliptis legion, we're never undone. With our hearts ablaze, we're the fearless ones. In Cliptis legion, we stand as one.
It's really fun. I was very surprised at how good the single target damage is. I thought that AoE damage would be better, but I think that sometimes, depending on if you catch your cooldowns right, single target damage, I think, might actually be better for this build than the AoE damage. Pretty crazy to see. Not what I expected. Call of the Ancients first, Ground Stomp, then we get like 3 Call of the Ancients out. Then when monsters move like that, it's a little harder. We should be getting some big numbers here. Not bad. This build does not disappoint. We're going to hop into the skill tree. So starting at the top, you're just going to put 2 points in. This is just going to be to unlock your next tier. So we're going to go into Lunging Strike. You can take any two. It doesn't really matter for this build. Whirlwind is only going to be used to apply bleed. That's a huge part of this and why we're going to be taking Whirlwind going into Furious Whirlwind. This is not going to be used for Whirlwind damage. We're going to be taking 1 point into Pressure Point. This is going to just apply vulnerable damage on a small chance. Coming down, we're going to be going into Ground Stomp, all the way up through Strategic Ground Stomp. The reason that we're taking this and why it's so important, this is going to reset the cooldown of our ultimate skills. We'll be able to basically take your Call of the Ancients, which is going to be the ultimate, and reset it back down to 0 as long as we hit 2 enemies with Ground Stomp. That's why we're taking this node over the other one. Ground Stomp is also a great source of Fury and vulnerable damage as well. We're going to be going into Martial Vigor for some damage reduction to elites. We're going to be taking Imposing Presence for some additional maximum life. Rallying Cry is going to go all the way down through Strategic Rallying Cry. This is going to be your source of Fortify. Fortify is going to play into our boss powers directly. It's going to be an incredibly great source of damage reduction and survivability. Going down into Outburst and Tough as Nails. The reason that we're taking this is also going to apply bleed. That's going to be super important. Outburst also gives us Thorns damage. That's where we're going to get Thorns damage for a Paragon board. We'll kind of talk about that when we get into the Paragon board a little bit. Challenging Shout is going to give us up to 20% maximum life, and it also is going to give us a 40% damage reduction. Our shouts should pretty much be off of cooldown all the time. As soon as the shouts fall off, they're kind of right back on based on how our gear is set up. We'll talk about that in the gear section. We're going to be going into Warcry. We're going to be putting 5 points here to maximize the amount of damage that it's giving us, all the way down through Power Warcry. This is going to add 10% to your Warcry damage. 3 points into Booming Voice. This is going to increase the duration of your shouts. Then we're going to be taking Guttural Yell. Whenever your shouts affect an enemy, they're going to deal 12% less damage to you. We're going to put 3 points into Aggressive Resistance. This is going to be another source of damage reduction. Now, making sure you have damage reduction outside of just being armor capped and resistance capped is actually the only real way to stay alive. Just those two stats, the armor and resistance, is not enough to keep your character alive. That's why things like Pit Fighter here are super important. This is going to give us damage reduction as well as damage to close enemies. We're going to be taking Slaying Strikes. This is going to give us increased damage to enemies that are healthy and injured. Healthy enemies are anywhere above 80%. Injured enemies is anywhere below 35% life. Then we're going to be going into No Mercy for some additional critical strike chance. 1 point into Thick Skin. Now, if you need to, if you're not getting enough Fortify later on when you try the build out, you can always add more points into Thick Skin. Then we're going to be going into Counteroffensive here. This is going to give us more damage when our Fortify is more than 50% of our maximum life. Defensive Stance. This is going to give us additional damage reduction from Fortify. Normally, Fortify is 15% damage reduction. This just increases that. It also will just heal us over time, just all the time. We get a 1.5% of our maximum life per second. Then we're going to be maxing out Call of the Ancients. This is where most of your damage is going to come from. It's incredibly strong because it has a summoner tag. And when we get into the gear, we'll talk about where the summoner tag comes into play, because that is incredibly important. This is also going to be an incredibly great source of Fury generation as well. Prolic will grant 10 Fury every single time that they damage an enemy with Frenzy. If we have a bunch of summons out, it's going to be constantly regenning all of our Fury. So that's really, really important that this is off of cooldown as much as humanly possible. Then we're going to be taking 3 points into Duelist. We're going to be running a dual wield setup, and we'll talk about that when we get into the gameplay loop and why we're doing that. We're also going to be taking Wallop. We're going to be running a one-handed sword and a one-handed mace. That's going to allow us to take advantage of the bleed from our slashing weapon with the Furious Whirlwind, and will also allow us to use a Wallop to get 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. And then the big one right here, Heavy Hitter, we're going to be going 3 points into this. We want to get this as absolutely high as possible. This is not only granting additional damage to your Earthquakes, it is also granting additional damage to your ultimate skills, which is going to be your Call of the Ancients. Your Call of the Ancients will also spawn an Earthquake. You see where we're going here? We're doing double damage into Earthquakes and into your ultimate skills. This is where it really starts to ramp up and get really fun. And for the final point and for your key passive, we're going to be going into Unconstrained. This is just going to increase your damage while berserking from 25% up to 60%. Whenever we're below 65% life, we're going to always be berserking, and we're going to take 30% less physical damage. So that's your skill tree. Now we're going to start with the Paragon board. Now, when you look at the planner, there's going to be a couple different options here for you. We're going to have your unique, and then we're also going to have your non-unique version. So you can use either one of these depending on where you're at. You can mix and match. If you find some of the pieces in the unique version, you can just put them on. The planner is set up so that all you have to do is just swap those pieces in. Now, fill out your first 200 Paragon points just like this build right here. There is a full Paragon board set up for you, but this is not it. This is going to be your optimal first pathing that you need to do. If you do not do that, then you're going to end up not spending all of the points that you need. But you can come over to the full Paragon board here. You can look at it. This is what it's going to be when you get to your final 300 grind, if that's something that you wanted to do. For the first and the starter board, we're going to be running Ire. This will give us damage while berserking. It's also going to give us some damage reduction and some additional damage to close enemies. The damage while berserking is going to come into play later on the Paragon board. Now we're going to be going with Weapon Master. This is going to give us 30% damage to injured and to healthy enemies. We do not have to worry about swapping weapons. This is just going to be used for the damage here. We're going to be coming up into Martial here. Whenever we use any of our shouts, it's going to reduce the cooldowns of all of our other abilities, which is going to be Ground Stomp. It's also going to be Call of the Ancients. It's another way to just take Ground Stomp off of cooldown as well as our ultimate skill. For the next board here, we're going to be running Decimator. Every time that we make an enemy vulnerable, we're going to deal 20% damage. And then anytime that we overpower, which Ground Stomp can overpower, we're going to gain an additional 20% increased damage bonus. Now, inside of this board here, we're going to be running Challenger. We need a lot of strength with this build because we need to max out our Executioner aspect, and we'll talk about that in the gear section. But this is going to just make it so that all of the normal nodes that we take inside of this board are going to get an increase to their stat line. Then we're going to be going into your Blood Rage node. The most important part about this, now everybody is going to be bleeding, so we will gain benefits from the first part of this where we get our berserking. But the most important part is going to be the second part of this, where we'll get 10% of our damage while berserking bonus as a multiplier. We have 450 damage while berserking. That gives us 45%. Then we're going to be going into Rumble. Rumble is going to increase the damage of our earthquakes. It's also going to increase the damage that we do to bosses and crowd-controlled enemies up to 15%. Then, on top of that, our earthquakes get a nice little multiplier as well. For the final board, we're going to be running the Force of Nature board. This is going to give us a huge increased damage to all of our earthquakes. This one is definitely something that you want to be taking. You're going to need 500% increase damage versus close. That's going to be super important. That's how you're going to max this out. It takes 40% of your damage versus close bonus and gives you a multiplier up to 200%. In that board, we're going to be running Revenge. Revenge is going to give us increased damage whenever we deal Thorns damage. That's why taking Outburst was so important in the skill tree. We're going to get that additional damage right from this here. The reason that we're putting Revenge in this final board is because it's going to give us additional things like a boost to your damage versus close here. Now, as we hit those willpower numbers and as our Paragon board and our points get leveled up, these we're slowly going to unlock. And as you add in more and more pieces of gear, you're also going to unlock more. You have bigger damage to close bonuses, and then you can start taking some of the affixes off of your weapons and adding in different bonuses to increase the amount of damage that you're doing. So more Paragon equals more options to do bigger damage in other places. It's a lot of fun to slowly get these Paragon points set up. For the gear, now with my setup right now, we're actually not running any Ubers at all. There really is only one that I can think of that we may end up trying out, but that's going to be the Ring of Starless Sky. Other than that, there really isn't anything that would fit into this build. The chest piece that we have on, we cannot replace with the Shroud of False Death, or else this whole build basically falls apart. The Ugly Bastard helmet is incredibly important because it is one of the strongest ones out there. Now, we'll actually have to test when we get a Harlequin's Crest and see if it's giving us increased ranks to our Call of the Ancients, how much that affects it, but as I can see right now, this is going to be the most optimal setup. We're going to be starting with your helmet, which is going to be the Ugly Bastard helmet. This is going to give us a huge multiplier. It's going to take all of our direct damage, and then it's going to convert that into fire damage, and then it's going to run through a big multiplier of up to 100%. For the chest piece, we're going to be running the Rage of Haragath. This is incredibly important also because we're going to be using the aspect here. As you can see, mine is only 750. Even just having a 750 piece of gear makes a huge difference. We have a 60% chance on a lucky hit to reduce the cooldowns of all of our skills by 1 second, which is huge. When you grab a big group of monsters, you pull them all together, and you start whirlwinding, you start applying bleed. With that bleed, that is going to proc that lucky hit chance, and then you have a 60% chance to reduce those cooldowns. You can watch your Call of the Ancients just spam over and over and over again because of how fast the cooldowns are going. For the gloves, we're going to be running Executioner. Now, overpowering, we won't do that often. That's really not the most important part about this. The most important part about this is that your Earthquake's damage is going to be increased by 5% for every 100 strength you have, up to 200%. Now, if you can see, I'm not even there yet. I'm at 190% and I have 3,900 strength. You need a lot of strength. That's why running the Challenger is so important inside of your Paragon board. For the affixes here, now we want to find the most optimal affixes, so make sure you follow along with the planner. It's going to be slightly different than the gear that you see on in the game because I haven't found all of that gear yet. But for the affixes here, we're going to be running max life, strength, and then you want to be running critical strike chance up until you get to 100% critical strike chance. I'm not even close to there, so once you get to that 100%, then you can slowly start pulling off pieces and adding on different affixes. For the tempers here, we're going to be running damage to close until you hit your damage to close cap, and then you can start removing things. And then we're going to be running earthquake size. For the pants, we're going to be running Ariat's Bearing. This is going to give you a massive cooldown reduction on your Call of the Ancients. Now, for anybody that has never used big cooldown reductions like this before, that 75% is going to be a cap. A single skill cannot get more than 75% cooldown reduction. The only way to reduce it on top of that is if additional skill points affects the cooldown. So we're going to actually have that in this build, and we'll talk about how that works. But right now, I have a 9.5 second cooldown. We have Call of the Ancients here. If I take this off here, and I look at it, I have a 10.8. Now, if I was to add 33% more cooldown reduction, it should go down a lot more, but because we hit that 75 cap, it doesn't go down any further. So that's really where you want to make sure that you're not putting too many masterworking crits into a specific one. So follow along with the planner to look at where the masterworking crits are going to go. For the boots, I actually don't want to be running Yen's Blessing. I'm just looking for another pair of boots. I was using it because I needed my resistance to be capped. So I'm not quite there yet. I've been taking points in the Paragon to make sure that I get closer to that cap, but I'm still very, very far underneath it. Now, I am missing a diamond here because I was just messing around with trying to figure out how to get the armor correctly, which we'll talk about also because that's definitely a challenge. So that's why we're running Yen's Blessing here. This is just a really great option if you're not resistance capped. Then for the weapon, we're going to be running Earthquakes. This is going to give your ground stop an earthquake, but that's not the most important part. While standing inside of that earthquake, and for 4 seconds after leaving it, you're going to deal additional damage. It also gives your earthquakes an additional damage bonus. For the affixes here, we're going to be running strength, max life, critical strike damage, and then for your tempers, we're going to be running damage while berserking, and this is where you get all of your ranks to heavy hitters from. Heavy hitters was at the bottom of the skill tree that gave you the increased damage to your ultimate and to earthquake damage. Then we're going to be running Ancestral Echoes. Whirlwind will have a chance to summon some Ancients, which they will also start whirlwinding, which is kind of fun to see. There's Ancients everywhere. The most important part about this is that we're going to gain Summoner damage. This is going to deal 35% increased Summoner damage. That is going to affect your Ancients that get summoned. They are all going to deal additional damage, and as you saw, we're slowly starting to stack that Summoner damage. For your affixes here, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, and then you want to run Critical Strike damage. It's just a little bit higher of a multiplier than the Vulnerable damage, but this is what I've had so far. Then for your Tempers, we're going to be running Damage to Close and then Heavy Hitters. For the other one, we're going to be running Vehement Brawler. This is where you get your extra 2 points into your Call of the Ancients to give you just a little bit more cooldown reduction. So if you look, we said 9.5. We're going to take this off. We go all the way up to 10.25. Put that back on, and then it drops back down. So having those ranks is definitely important for this. We're also going to gain an additional damage every single time that we use our ultimate skill. It's definitely going to be a really great option for you. Then for the affixes here, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, and we want to run Critical Strike damage, but this is the only thing that I've found so far. So as my gear gets better, that's what I'm going to be looking for. For the Tempers here, we're going to be running Damage while Berserking and Heavy Hitter. For your slashing weapon, we're going to be running Incendiary Fissures here. Your earthquakes are going to deal increased damage. They're also going to get converted into fire damage, which is going to play directly into your Ugly Bastard helmet. That's where all of the damage from the earthquakes is going to get converted in, because the Ugly Bastard helmet is going to take anything that is fire damage and then multiply it. For the affixes here, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, Critical Strike damage, and then for your Tempers, we're going to be running Damage to Close and Heavy Hitter. For the first ring, we're going to be running Ancestral Charge. Now, we won't have charge on the bar, but this is going to give us a big boost to our summon damage. We want summon damage to be as high as possible. Now the affixes here, really, really important. This one I got lucky from the Opal vendor. I got a chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds, and I got a GA on it. If you can find that, that is absolutely 100% optimal. There are a lot of different ways to get vulnerable damage out there. This has just been the most consistent for me. So for the affixes here, we want to run Strength, Critical Strike, and then Chance to make enemies vulnerable. That's going to be your ultimate and your optimal setup. For the tempers here, we're going to be running Warcry cooldown reduction as well as damage while berserking. For the other ring, we're going to be running Bold Chieftain. Whenever you cast a shout, its active cooldown is going to be reduced by up to 30% per nearby enemy, and that goes up to a maximum of 70%. So you gain 70% cooldown on your shouts. It's really, really huge, and that's how we're going to have our uptime on things like our Rallying Cry, where we're going to get our Fortify from, which is going to play into our boss powers and give us a huge barrier. Then for the affixes, we're also going to run Strength, Max Life, Critical Strike Chance, and then we're going to get some Call of the Ancients cooldown reduction only if you don't have 75% coming from here, and then we're going to get Critical Strike damage as our extra bonus here. For the Amulet, we're going to be running Apogeic Furor. This is going to give us increasing damage to our ultimate skill up to 150%. At 10 stacks, it's going to reset the cooldown and the bonus, so it just refreshes itself. But every single time that we cast our ultimate, we gain increased damage. It's pretty crazy. Then for your affixes here, we're going to be running Strength. You don't have to have movement speed, but movement speed is definitely a great option if you wanted to run something like Resistances, or if you wanted to run something just like Pit Fighter. Pit Fighter is a great option for this build. And then the total armor. There seems to be something weird happening with total armor. When you take this off, we go way down to 699. And then when we put this on, we go all the way up to 2,381. That is definitely not a 78% increase. So this has been the way that I've been able to cap out my armor. I just leave on the total armor percentage. So if you're having issues with your armor, you can absolutely do that. Once my resistances are there, I can replace all of these with skulls, and I'll probably be a lot closer to that cap. But it is really, really multiplying something like that. It's been pretty crazy to see that. But that's just a little tip for anybody that's trying to get to that cap of 1,000. I'm way over, as you see, but if I take it off, I'm way under. So that's the option that you have right there. For your affixes, we're going to be running movement speed and then damage to close. For the Barbarian expertise, we're going to be running Two-Handed Axe. Now, that does not mean that you need a Two-Handed Axe to be equipped. You just have to put this on, and then that's going to give you a 10% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Now, a really great tip for anybody, if you haven't got to do this yet, go into normal on your character, go to the training dummies, put on multiple training dummies, put on whatever weapon you want to level up. You hit some of the level 1 normal training dummies with Whirlwind and that weapon selected, and it will level up your expertise in a flash. It's incredibly fast. For the runes, if you do not have any of these, make sure you go into the planner, go down to the very bottom. We have an entire layout for all of the rune combinations that you can use. Because some of these are legendary runes and they are a little bit harder to find, there is options for you if you don't have those. So what we're going to be running here is we're going to be running Pak Zek. This is going to help reduce the cooldowns of our ultimate every single time that we spend at least 100% of our maximum fury. And then we're also going to be running Igni Tech. Now, there's some weird interactions with Igni this season. Whenever you cast it, sometimes it's going to put the earthquakes in weird places when it hits other monsters. So it's not the most reliable for placement, but it still gets a lot of damage out there as you cast your earthquakes. And like I said, for additional setups, make sure you check the planner as well. For the boss powers, we're going to be running Wandering Death's Chest Beam. This is going to give you a 50% increased damage multiplier for 1 second after you hit an enemy with this ability. You have to be channeling Whirlwind to use it. That's the only way to get it to work, because it only works on channeling skills. We're going to be running Harbingers of Hatred's Volley. The first part of this boss power we won't take advantage of because we're not going to be using a basic skill, but every time that we activate our main boss power, which is going to be the Wandering Death, we're going to get a vulnerable damage increase. It's going to be 30%. For the other boss power we're going to be running, this is incredibly important. This gives you a 150% increase to all of our summoning damage. That's going to be really big, especially with this build where we're going to be focusing on your Call of the Ancients, which is why that summoning tag is so important. What I mean by a summoning tag, when you look at Call of the Ancients here, it says ultimate and then it says summon. Anything that is a summon is going to be affected by all of these increases to damage. It's really, really fun to run. You have a ton of summons out. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen here, my current bonus isn't even capped. That's where making sure that we get our Paragon leveled up, where we take additional damage close, and now I can re-roll some of the damage close into critical strike damage. That's going to increase the summoning damage at the bottom here. It takes a percentage of your critical strike damage bonus, and then you get an increase from that. So as we get higher up into the levels, and remember, when you start putting your characters together, not everything will be active. We're going to have to work for things. We're going to have to try and find things. We're going to have to hunt things down. So this is just going to be one of those. As we get more Paragon points, we get more options to add additional damage in other places. Then we're going to be running Blackmail or Sabotage. This is going to give us 30% of whatever Fortify we gain as barrier. That's why it's going to be so important that we have Rallying Cry off of cooldown and then use it again so that it stays up 100% of the time. For the Mercenaries, we're going to be running Subo. This is going to be your main choice here. Subo is going to give us some additional movement speed after we kill enemies, but it's also going to give us 25% increased critical strike damage to enemies that are hit by Subo's cover fire. And then for your opportunity, you can run Variana. That's completely up to you. I've been running right here and using Bastion. This is a 90% damage reduction every 25 seconds, so it's incredibly strong in helping you stay alive. Variana will give you increased attack speed, so it's really up to you which one you want to run. For your gameplay loop, there are a couple things that you're going to want to know here when you're doing this, especially if you're going to be fighting bosses. Bosses is really where it's going to be the most important that you get this rotation down. The rotation is going to be Call of the Ancients, Ground Stomp, Call of the Ancients, and then your shouts, if you can get it to work. Now, the reason that we're doing that, Ground Stomp is going to reset the cooldown of your Call of the Ancients by a certain amount, depending on what you hit. So we want to make sure that we use Call of the Ancients first, then Ground Stomp, then Call of the Ancients, and then all of your shouts are going to take advantage of Martial. With Martial, it's going to reduce the cooldown of Call of the Ancients and Ground Stomp, so we're going to be getting into the cycle of getting as many of your Ancients out as possible in the first couple seconds of that fight. So the way that it works, we'll show you this right here on the screen. You press your Call of the Ancients, your Ground Stomp, and then your Call of the Ancients is going to come up again, and then we're going to use our shouts. With this setup, we're going to be constantly using your tapping button because I'm running Igni. We want to tap. Now, if you don't want to tap, you can put Bach here, you can use Bach. But that's going to be the way that it works. You can constantly keep on pressing Ground Stomp as long as your cooldowns don't come up. And as you can see, Call of the Ancients comes off of cooldown. You can watch your effects of Rage of Haragoth happen. When you have a big pack of enemies, you're going to be able to see how quickly that your Rage of Haragoth takes effect when you're hitting multiple targets and applying bleed to multiple enemies. So as you pop your cooldowns, Ground Stomp, cooldowns on your ultimates, and then you're just going to start attacking. And then everything just starts to come off of cooldown all the time. You have so many Ancients up here. It's just a mayhem of Ancients in the middle there, and it is a ton of fun to see. You have all of the upheavals, you have all the whirlwinds. So that is the reason that we're going to be running the order that we do when you get into your gameplay loop. That's it. That's the Whirlwind Summoner Barb. I am absolutely super excited to get more variants of this build out there. I have some ideas that I'm going to get out there and test, but I wanted to make sure we got a video out there for everybody to use in order to put this build together. The changes that are going to be coming will probably not be super game changing, so make sure you get the gear together, get this set up so that while we change the build and we figure more stuff out, you are already ready to make the very, very minor changes that I think are going to be coming. Get out there, push the pits, kill some monsters. Let me know how far this build gets you in the comments. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm live every night. I'd love it if you stopped by, said hi, theory crafted with me. Catch you on the clip side.